So,
So I
so
can as well. Do I need to be a co-host or?
permission to record
Well,
granted.
I'll send you a raw file once we get
Okay.
finished.
Okay.
Okay, so we're recording. Hello, hello. Go ahead, Sean.
Wow, super exciting call today, Dan. Dan, we've got Danielea on the call with us today, and Danielea is got a fantastic past. She runs a group called the Listening Field, which people can go on to. We'll promote her website here shortly. But from a very young age, Danielea was communicating with trees, communicating with streams, communicating directly with nature. I've done a call with her previously, and I know this ties into some of the software that you've got. I know you understand the physics of that. And she's got a really exciting program coming up where she's going to be doing work with olive trees in Greece. And I'll just really summarize it quick. But Danielea works with a lot of different groups in Canada, Native American groups, where the elder of the area is the tree, one of the oldest trees or the oldest boulders, and they communicate with lakes and streams. So Danielea, with that being said, let me turn it over to you. Go ahead and give us a little bit of your background and what you're doing, and then we can move into the projects that you got coming up.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me on, Sean, and nice to meet you, Dan. I'm excited to see what we can get up to together. So I think it's important to share that I'm a particular human, meaning that I know there's others like me, and which is why I've become to share this, is that I'm wired like directly into Mother Earth. And so over the past 15 years, but this is of course put in place since I was born, my primary family and my life partners, my project partners, are what I call nature elders. And everyone who does, nature communication as their profession or their mission or their work will have a very unique orientation, because all of our relationships with nature is unique. We're different vibrations, so is our relationship, even with the same tree or the same river. So my orientation, excuse me, my family are from the water, rock, and tree nations. So we are
And
talking
you
specific
haven't,
trees, specific bodies of water, 10 years with fresh water, finally started working with Mother Ocean in 2022. And rock people means could be the bedrock elders that are in the mantle of Mother Earth. They could be a glacial boulder, in a park, or they could be a mountain, or apu as they call them in South America. Dan, you were going to say something.
I love it. I was just going to say, you have indigenous ancestors, don't you? Do you connect this with the power of indigenous blood, more grounded kind of thing?
I can't tell you that that's true. And the reason I say that is because we didn't even know who my father's lineage is. It was never talked about. So yes, my great grandmother is full-blooded indigenous, but I didn't know this when this was developing for me.
Uh-huh. But do you know the
So
name of the tribe?
no, I have nothing. I only have pictures. I only have pictures, and my father has passed on.
Ah,
She was, this all took place in England. So it's very likely that she was taken over, likely from the east coast of the US to England, where she ended up marrying someone who was British, and then giving birth, of course, to my grandmother, and then, of course, through her.
I'm hearing it may have something to do with Haudenosaunee or Iroquois somewhere in
It,
there.
well,
I
that's,
can feel
yeah.
that.
Well, and I began to be spoken to by my great grandmother and by my grandmother back in 2009.
Nice.
Somebody said a phrase, something like, it may be the prayer of your great grandmother,
Mm.
who through her grace you are here today. And it was like, bing, this doorway opened, and then I suspected, and then I started to ask my other siblings and found out that my niece had actually done a family tree project before, just in high school, just before my father passed. And that's when he shared, and he'd never shared that before. And then he said, he was 80, and I have a picture. And so that's all we have. And to be honest with you, this ties in with the olive trees as well, is that my lineage through the ancestry DA is also 39% Eastern European Jew.
Mhm.
So it's, you know, I'm Celtic on my mother's side, and then I am Jewish and indigenous on my father's side. However, I didn't really know any of that. So what I say is, and many elders, indigenous elders say this as well, we're all indigenous to Mother Earth, and we can go direct. So anything we want to know, we just connect heart to heart with someone you love, a tree you love, a river you love. Ask your questions, and they will give us answers, very specific answers. And so I just, you know, I say go direct, listen 360,
Mhm.
right? We don't need someone else to teach us how to do this. We
Yeah.
already know, we've just forgotten, right?
It's a
And yeah,
beautiful thing. And once we kind of add a little bit about the physics of that, I
oh,
mentioned indigenous because the physics is even interesting there that if a tribe lived for 1,000 years in the same land and walked barefoot on that land, the phase lock between the Schumann harmonics in that land meant like when a grandmother died in Australia and the storm went across the song line 3,000 miles down the day she died, that magnetic line was the family pet of her family in the indigenous tribes around Byron Bay, meaning it was Auntie Lorraine, actually, the Bundjalung. So the point is that those magnetic lines became literally the family pet, and also the Hopi, they would sing the same song to the same blue corn for 1,000 years, and that corn would not germinate unless they heard that song. And we know a lot more about the physics now, which is that see, so we've been in the business of measuring trees, as you know. I learned from famous Professor Phil Callahan, and he was using a hemp transducer capacitive coupling, and he could measure whether the tree was hearing the Schumann harmonics. We now know that the Schumann harmonic cascade is literally a phase conjugate pump wave. It's literally implosion. It's caduceus, and that is a mechanism of not only centripetal force but consciousness itself, because what's called a phase conjugate pump wave in the Schumann means that if you get those frequencies right, your brain waves make the exact same frequencies, alpha to gamma. And what that does is focus the liquid crystal vortex in the synaptic array down to a point tuned to Planck. So we actually know the exact frequencies that enable us, that connect the Schumann harmonics in the tree to your brain waves, which is a fun way of saying, well, when you look at the physics, you begin to understand why you can talk to trees and waters very literally, and we admire your skills. But the point is, this is actually measurable and teachable using, brainwave measurement, et cetera. And those links are flameinmind.com/life force and also goldenmean.info/trees. You'll see 30 years of measuring life force in trees. But that's all, as you say,
so
you don't really need the physics to do it.
no, this
No,
is
but the thing is,
some
actually,
people do. No, some people do,
yeah,
Dan. And that's why I'm interested now in partnering with other people who
yeah.
can measure what happens when we open a listening field with a group of humans and a group of nature elders.
No, it's
And
perfect.
just explain that the listening field didn't emerge until June of 2020. It took lockdown, planetary lockdown, for me not to be able to travel, to continue my apprenticeship. I mean, I had graduated from my apprenticeship actually by that point, and I was what I call a collaborator in training with the nature elders. But when I could no longer travel, what I discovered, because I've been building relationships, building credibility, building trust with them for more than a decade, some of them more than a decade, I could open this ceremonial field. I could invite them. This is all in the quantum field, right? I could invite the nature elders to come by specific name and location, and I could literally feel their energetic frequency join the field one by one by one by one. And we could talk directly, heart to heart. And I never had to get on a plane or get in a car or spend a dime other than, whatever I need to sustain my health and my vitality.
Yeah.
So what happened after that is I discovered that everyone can do this.
Mm.
And all it takes is love. which is an energy. It's a life force energy. And as long as I have love with a particular tree or with a particular river, when I invite them in, when I say, I call in Stako, Fraser River, and the love I feel for him in that moment when I'm doing that, his energy arrives. And so this is the gift, right, of sometimes these challenges that we have on our planet, that if we remain open, we can discover together, especially with our nature people, new ways of being and living together that neither of us have ever imagined before. So I really, as an interbeing ambassador, this is the role that the trees told me, that the Sitka spruce trees told me in 2008 who I am. And at that point, I had no clue what that actually meant. But as an interbeing ambassador, and I'm stepping into that role now, especially going to Greece, my job is to keep inviting us to include the voices and the wisdom of the nature elders to the table. Whatever that looks like. It could be the kitchen table, it could be the classroom, it could be the think tank, it could be government forum, it could be city council, etc. Because I truly, truly believe, one, we are designed to be co-creative partners with the world builders and with the nature people. We're designed that way, and we're just we're just evolving into that capacity. And two, if we don't, we will end up recreating
Yeah. Well,
some of the crap that we have already created, which is not to say that we won't survive. There's no ledge like that in the consciousness of life. It just simply means it's going to take longer. There's probably going to be more suffering. And, because our world is created from consciousness originally, when we become partnered with the consciousness of a tree elder, or a consciousness of a marsh or a swamp, our energetic frequency becomes aligned with the life force frequency. And it, just as you say, it shifts. How I think has radically changed because I live in the consciousness of Mother Earth and our kin. And this goes for this alliance with the olive tree people that emerged after the events of October 7th. I can track the changes in me since I began being mentored by the Deva of Peace, the Deva of the olive trees. And of course, this is new for me because I've not been working with nature spirits. They're nature spirits. They're the Devic realm. They're not the physical realm.
That's beautiful. And apparently those spirits actually consider us drunk because we don't work with them. And they even say that, our tornadoes will continue to be unsteered until, and that sort of brings up the idea that the more we understand about the science of this, it may also be true that may help us to do it better. For example, that the harmonics that we call Schumann in the tree, and also, by the way, in the phase conjugate frequencies of hydrogen and water and trees, they both operate on the same spectra. It's called Planckfire.com. Take Planck times integer exponential golden ratio, and that produces charge collapse to the Planck threshold, which is the musical key of every wave in physics. And that then distributes into an array called longitudinal coherence, which is the physics of ancestral memory for sure, called songlines. So here are some of the things that tells us. We now know why this is going to work better at sunrise and sunset. We know why this is going to work better if you're sitting where magnetic lines cross. This is going to work better if you train yourself to make the correct brainwave cascade. And let me give you a simple example of how that training worked. When Korotkov first measured kids who were seeing without their eyes, and they're making this golden ratio cascade from alpha toward gamma in their brainwaves, and then they're blindfolded and they can see without their eyes. But interestingly, at the same time, they start seeing their ancestors. The physics of clairvoyance is the same thing, which is that implosion in your brainwaves coheres you with a longitudinal array, which is the telephone grid of the trees. So, but interestingly, when those kids were being trained to see without their eyes, the first thing, he was measuring their brainwaves, and, do you need expensive gadgets and brainwave measurements to do it? No. You know what the tool they did to teach the kids to start? Close your eyes, relax, and get still. And then imagine yourself in beautiful nature. And then your brain flips a switch and your brainwave starts imploding, because if you're in beautiful nature, then you can absorb charge. And that implosion is the phase lock between your brainwave alpha gamma cascade and literally the Schumann cascade, which is the same golden ratio times Planck. It's all at planckfire.com, the physics. Point being that that embedding, for example, is if you were measuring a shaman steering a tornado and you were watching from a distance, you would see the bioplasmic streamers from the shaman's belly embed in and become the center of gravity of that tornado. But the shaman would tell you, I'm eating the hoocha, I'm eating the anger, I'm eating the pain of that tornado, the same way you do with the tree, which is to say you're feeling the pain of the tree, and the tree falls in love with you. So the physics fits your story perfectly. And I'm just suggesting the more of the science we know, we can actually teach ourselves to do it better.
I would thank you for that explanation. I would say that it would teach some people better.
Mm.
Only some people. I mean, I'm moving into whole brain. I'm like 30 years in my left brain, 30 years in my right. Now I'm in whole brain. And you know, the olive tree people are assisting with that even more. So what I mean to say to you is that we need all pathways to the center. We need all pathways to
Yes.
harmony. Because the reason I say this is that for anyone else who's listening, what you call understanding, for someone like me, the way I'm wired, I actually can't even listen.
Well, it is very
No, listen to me. Too much information. Though I don't, first of all, the why has no place in my world because I know KNOW, right? Intuitive, know from firsthand direct experience. And as a sovereign human with my own agency, that's actually all I need in order to move into action. Like
well.
I've been doing this for a long, long
That's
time.
beautiful. And it means that, your intuition already told you that this is not going to work if you're in a metal building full of electrosmog. The radio doesn't connect. And also that if you happen to
True.
be if you happen to be on a magnetic line cross point and you know how to map magnetic lines either with dowsing or measurement, when you get to where the magnetic line crosses, the radio works better. And if you do it at sunrise and sunset, the radio works better, or solstice. These are all called four-wave mixing in physics, which is where the conjugation embeds in the longitudinal array. So the longitudinal array is a very useful and practical way to tune up that radio. It really is. There's practical advice there. And once
Beautiful.
people begin to understand that the brainwave harmonics that create not just lucid dreaming, but clairvoyance, are the embedding in that array. And that longitudinal coherence array called songline is absolutely DNA radio and tree radio, and it's very measurable.
Mm, mm, mm. What's
Danielea,
interesting, so I'm just going to translate. I just want to translate, Sean, just before we come over to
of
you.
course.
So my translation of what you just shared about measuring using dowsing rods or whatever is I will do this when I go to Grace. I'm going to arrive into this sacred valley, and I've seen pictures of it, and it's like already I know I'm going to cry because there's something about coming home for me that's going to happen. But I also, arrive with a blank slate. But what happens is I do exactly that. I'm long, slow breathing. I'm empty. I'm open. And essentially my whole torso is a sensing organ. And
Yeah.
I literally drop my awareness, and I share this with people when we open the listening field. It's like we come from here, we talk about things, but I invite us come from here and we drop down into here. And I literally will use my torso as a sensing agent. And so I'm sensitive to vibration, to magnetic pull, and I will just start walking towards the elder who wishes to speak with me in that moment to open up. Or I open up and I feel, wow, there's such a cohesive feel. This is a whole community here. I stay back of the threshold. I don't enter without permission. And I just stand there and breathe. And usually I'll drum or I'll rattle and I'll make an offering of a song. And then I'll say who I am. I'll say why I've come. I will wait to hear them speak back, to feel the welcome, right? And then I will start to step forward into their world, and using my body, right, as a sensor, will be guided where to go and for how long and what to do once I'm there. So what I really like about this is this duet we're doing here, is that for some people, what you're saying, that language is like speaking French, right? And they don't understand it. I, on the other hand, can translate it into experiential, body-based language, right? Where people go, oh, right, I kind of do that too, So what I love is that we do need both. And as I said to you already, I would love to be able to measure what is the tree's frequency when we haven't arrived. What
Yeah,
are the human
we do
beings'
that.
frequencies
We can
when
help
we
you
have
do
not
that. Yeah.
arrived? And then individually, right? All that measurement. And then as we start to come into heart link with the elder, can we measure the actual field that we create together?
Yeah,
Yes, we can.
we actually measured when were doing the tree hugging, the people that were most able to entrain with the low frequencies of the tree, the Schumann, were those who practiced sacrocranial therapy, because they're very accustomed to feeling very low frequencies, actually. So
Yes.
it is what you're calling the listening field is actually literally implosion, which is very measurable acoustically, electrically, capacitively, Schumann harmonics. It's literally implosion. But Sean, you wanted to say something.
Well, you know what? After what you just said, Danielea, this is so beautiful because I'm the person in the middle, right? I'm the person that's in the middle. And I'm like, I love it because I know that Dan has the physics to prove that this is actually something
Yeah.
that all of us can do from the physics
Yeah.
standpoint. And you're the person in real time that's out there doing it with just the natural skill set that God has given all of us. And I have to say, I'm so excited to be on this call because I've been wanting to get both of you together for a bit. But the ability to know that all of nature around us is conscious living entities, that trees are living beings, living entities, and that the boulders and that the earth and that the lakes are all conscious living entities. And, it's one thing to hear it and it's one thing to communicate it. But then when we're able to work and have Dan, really break down the physics to show from a level of physics, from science, that this is real and it really is very possible, then for all of us, what it does, it gets us to look in the mirror and say, what is it that I need to do to get myself in alignment with that frequency, with Mother Earth, with nature? And the beautiful part of what you said is that it all starts with love, right? It's a loving frequency. So we're building that loving resonance. And then with the projects that you're doing, Dan literally can come in and measure the before and after of these interactions with the trees, with the olive tree people and all these things. So as a third party that's jumped onto this call that was able to get you together, I am so excited because this is what we need. This is what the planet needs right now, to raise the consciousness, to really understand of everything around us and be more conscious of how we live our lives, and what we're going to use for building materials, and all
Yeah.
the different things, right? And
Sean,
go ahead, Dan.
we should mention that while we're understanding the physics of why trees and rivers can talk to us, and by the way, ball lightning is famous for telepathy as well. But you know what cannot talk to you? A metal building. So what's the difference? The difference is very electrically defined. The metal building cannot implode. It cannot entrain to Planck. It cannot embed in a longitudinal array. It's literally switched off the charge distribution efficiency called heaven. So as we more and more understand that we don't have the DNA radio working when we're in ugly metal buildings with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and our kids their souls are being destroyed daily with Bluetooth in their ears. So once we understand the physics a little bit more of what soul is, and I recommend physicsofsoul.com. We have 20 documentaries there. The physics of soul is literally the ability to embed in that longitudinal array exactly what the DNA radio and the tree radio is working. And by the way, to see the low frequency heart harmonics and train with the low frequencies of a tree, goldenmean.info/trees, and you'll see a lifetime of measuring these things. It's literally, the same talent that you have, Daniel, to hear the trees. The sacrocranial practitioner is accustomed to feeling very low frequencies in people, the sacrocranial pump frequencies, and their ability to entrain and embed. And then they add their attention to that child or to that tree, and you can measure the increase in coherence of the tree or the child because the attention of the healer, which is you, added to the tree, actually adds centripetal force. And that is the gift of added consciousness because it's literally, again, implosion.
It's beautiful. Now, Danielea, I have been very blessed because we've talked before, and I want to get into the olive tree people. I want to do all this, but I do want to just rewind back because you have a beautiful childhood. Like I remember from the first call that we did, at a very young age, you were talking to a tree and talking to a stream that I believe was out back in your backyard. Is that right? Like when you were very young, and we don't have to spend a lot of time, but I'd
No,
like to just go back to your early childhood because the gift of being able to do this was given to you at birth. But I want to kind of progress into that and move into more of where we're at right now because it's really a beautiful story and it's great to hear.
thank you, Sean. Yeah, I think it's important to share a bit about this because people like me as children, need mentoring. So I was born what I now call, I mean, I had no language for this. I had no comprehension at all. I was born a high level telepath, empath, incarnator. So all three. Incarnator simply means I literally evolve and physically, cellularly become whoever it is I'm meant to be in order to serve that in the way that I'm meant to serve, right? Not everybody does that, right? It's like I can't talk about something until I become it. Other people teach something in order to understand it. I have to become it and live it, and then I can talk about it. But as a child, as a telepath, I could hear what everybody was thinking. I could feel what they were feeling as an empath. But then I watched them say something different and do something different. So I looked at everybody around me and said, you guys are all full of caca. Because for someone like me, integrity is absolutely important. It's like 1,000% important in order for us to trust. So when we see people say something, and we can tell when somebody's lying, we can tell when they're, et cetera, et cetera. So I had a really challenging time, and I was in a very fractious family. So, there was a lot of unspoken emotional energy feeling around as well. So I used to have this dream. Again, I've lived in my imaginal realm probably, 95% of my life. But I used to have this recurring waking dream where I'd be walking down the sidewalk and I would meet this grandmother, this human grandmother. And she would look me in the eyes and she would recognize me. I mean, this is all just sort of unconscious kind of thing. She would recognize me. She would take me home. She would teach me about these abilities that I had. And she would also help me manage in the world, like teach me how to be in this human world. And the grandmother never came. But it was years later that I realized that it was actually, the grandmother did come, but it was the grandmother willow tree at the bottom of my street and Highland Creek who called me. And literally, I escaped there every single opportunity I had from the age of 5 until 7, until we left and moved to the States temporarily. And I remember that I would experience such quiet in the telepathic realm because they don't have any chatter. They don't have any mind talk. So in that realm, and of course I was curious, and there were tadpoles and there were frogs, and I felt welcome in a way that I never felt welcome in the human world. And I had a sense of belonging. So that became my definition of home and family, strictly through a feeling and telepathic experience. Now, later on, in when I was 9 years old, I remember being on the playground, and I remember these group of girls wanted me to be their leader. They didn't ask me. I just knew that. And they were coming towards me, wanting to ask me if this other little girl could join our group. And I remember feeling so frustrated, like, why are you coming to me? And I literally looked up at the universe and I said, take this away now. Like, boom, decreed it. And they did. So my telepathy, the empathy didn't go away, but the telepathic, that kind of crystal clarity being tuned into the collective field like a radio frequency, it diminished. It diminished. So it was many years later. And so I was lucky in the human world to encounter an applied art form called playback theater, which was the perfect application for my specific gifts. And so I did work and live in the human world for 25 years, but I called it, now when I look back, it was like passing. I was passing as human. I was faking it. I was like, oh yeah, I want to get married. Oh yeah, I want to have children. Oh yeah, look at me, I look normal. But inside I knew that I wasn't. But it took 2008, so at the age of 50, and I kept asking every day, why am I here? Why am I here? Why do I have these gifts if all I'm going to do is judge humanity for how they're treating Mother Earth? Of course, I wasn't saying any of this. I didn't really have language either, verbal language, until later. But finally, and I'd been answering the call I'd lived in foreign countries. I'd been answering a spiritual call, but I just never knew why. I just always obeyed it. And then in 2008, in the summer, in June, I heard this call, and that means they occupy my awareness every time I'm not doing something else. It's like, come to Haida Gwaii, come to Haida Gwaii, come to Haida. It's like, all right, I'll come to Haida Gwaii. And the minute I, make plans or book a flight or whatever, they stop because they're like, okay, she's coming. And it was one of those experiences where I thought it was Mother Earth that called me. It wasn't. It was Mother Ocean, and it was the Sitka spruce tree family. And they're my home family species. They're my home family species. And interestingly enough, they don't talk. Like, there are some nature elders, they actually don't verbalize, and they don't telegraph to me in that way. But anyways, there was a situation in which I was with some a tourist guide in a group, which rarely happens, but it was the only way I could get to the sacred space. And something happened that triggered this anger I have about why can't they feel what they do to Mother Earth, which was always the refrain, it was always the question, which is kind of the victim's question, right? Like, why are they, right? And anyways, I handled it when I was there in the forest, but later that evening I was upstairs in my room. My friend was making dinner downstairs, and I remembered that experience, and I got furious again. And I was about to say, another conversation with the universe, why can't they? But I knew enough at that point that I was part of the problem if I was going to be, raging and angry and judging about humanity. And I had the wherewithal to say, why do I feel so much? Not why can't they feel, but why do I feel so much? Why do I feel what happens to Mother Earth if all I'm going to do is judge humanity? I'm useless then. And then in a really snarky way, which they're used to it, I go, and by the way, smarty pants, who the heck am I? In the very next moment, as if, like God was in the room, I hear this chorus of voices very low. And I believe it was the Sitka spruce tree family going, you are an interbeing ambassador. And this is 2008, right? And nothing much has really transpired, in those intervening years since I was very, very young. And my whole life flashed before my eyes. And I laughed. I was like, oh my God, I am. That's exactly what I am. My life path, how life has trained me is perfect. I don't fit in either world. I live in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. Anyways, and then I was like, yeah, but what does that mean? How do I put that on a resume?
Beautiful. It means you can be a voice for the trees, which is a wonderful thing. In fact, I heard my inner voice.
I'm going to correct you. I'm going to correct you because I am not a voice for the trees. Here's what I say. The trees can speak for themselves. I can help you hear them. And this is where it's empowering. I don't set myself up as sort of here, I'll communicate for you. That's not what our world needs. Our world needs every single human being awake to the fact that they are designed to be in conscious co-creative partnership with a body of water, with a tree, potentially with a mountain person, but it could also be someone else. It could be the mycelium community. I mean, we all have different orientations and we have different missions. So this
The
is
way
why I say that to you.
the way of being a voice for someone also just means that uh, the tree, the very old trees particularly have lower frequencies, which means they have bigger auras, which means they have a bigger listening field. It's interesting. There's a group here in Austria, Georg Gaup, who sponsored all the Emoto conferences on water in Europe. And they have a tradition where they advise, they say, well, you find some very old tree and you kind of go sit under it and I found an incredible one the other day, and I felt this incredible rush. It was fabulous. It was a huge old tree. And as I felt that rush, and it was so wonderful, it's just like overwhelmingly wonderful. But their advice is that now, whatever tree you adopted, you learn to visualize that tree from a distance regularly, like every day, and you say a prayer to that tree. Something like, I'm so grateful to you. I so much love you. Absolute gratitude to that tree. And that tree will then adopt you. And the point of this tradition was that tree will fix your immune system, actually. That what happens is the tree is like embedded in the aura of the earth more deeply than you could ever be, because its roots and its size and its low frequencies mean more embedding, which is exactly the physics of hearing the tree. And so that tree can literally be your ground. And you know what earthing means, the book Earthing means, if you have experience of ground, you can fix your immune system. But what is the perfect ground, obviously, is access to a very old tree. And we say in physics, perfect grounding is actually access to fractality, which is access to perfected charge distribution, which is the actually definition of the word heaven, or plains of Charon, or Champs-Élysées. So heaven is that perfect distribution defined by grounding, and the perfect grounding, obviously, is the old tree, because it's the root for embedding in the array. And your ability to steer something big in that array means that if your aura embeds in that tree and the tree in you, you get a longer wave. And as Surfers of the Zavuya said, from Carlos Suarez, from Jose Argüelles, ride the long wave, Uncle Joe. So you're riding the long wave, and I think it's beautiful. I admire, by the way, I definitely admire your talent and skill and intuition and your way to develop this and speak about it. But I do think we could help you if you felt like playing with some serious physics to help put this together in ways that make it more understandable to people who like to talk science sometimes.
I would love to. I would love to. And I want to really. I'm going to show a few slides. Would that be okay, Sean? If I
Let
showed
me
it?
let me do screen share for you here real quick.
Okay.
All set.
Okay. Let's see. Make sure I'm on the right. Yeah. Here we go. You know. Is it this one? Sorry. No, it's this one I wanted to speak to. So, these are, when you talked about the tree person assisting us in heightening, the health of our immune system. For me, this is one of just a whole array of benefits and reasons why consciously partnering with them in a two-way reciprocal fashion benefits everybody. And so exploring the frontiers of co-creative partnership. This is, of course, the cutting edge and the leading edge. I am doing this myself, and I believe that that's what we're doing right now in the 21st century. And I would love to have more case studies, right? For example, what we did recently with a group who hosts an annual event in a particular site. And they wanted to take that event to a new level. And I said, well, why don't you create conscious partnership with the nature elders who live on that site? And so I opened a listening field online. So listening field can be online or in person, online. And each person formed what I call a heart link, a heart bond with a particular nature elder. Some of them were surprised who showed up. right? Because we can think, oh, I really love this tree and, I'm working on this project and I want to partner with this tree. But when you actually put out the essence of that project, the nature elder who shows up in your own heart isn't that one. It's somebody else, right? Because they all have different gifts, different medicine, different characters, different voices, and we can partner with them short-term or long-term. So the new frameworks for local and planetary issues, the emergence of the olive tree people in the listening field that I was guided to host following the events of October 7th is a perfect example of this. Like, who would have thought that the olive tree nation across the earth would come forward and offer to partner with us so that we can, through their modeling and through heart link with them, become the frequency of peace. And not only that, we've also learned, this comes through the fairy community, that human beings as a species we actually don't know what peace is, because in recorded history, we have only ever had war. And this makes perfect sense to me, that we actually require in consciousness to be able to imagine peace in order to manifest it. And so this is the other benefit that is starting to show itself in those of us who are building these personal relationships with the olive tree people monthly in the listening field that I hold on the 6th day. So I'm going to say more about that as I go on. Now, conduct action research. This is the realm that I really want to start to dive into with you, Dan, because this is real-time research. And I will say to you that when I was doing an on-site listening field over a couple of weeks in Nova Scotia last summer, I asked the nature elders, I said, when we partner with you, I know that we evolve. Do you evolve? And they said, absolutely. The moment this, what you would call coherence or implosion or whatever it is that happens, the moment that happens, we all amplify our ability to serve life. We all evolve, and we all can amplify our ability to serve life. It moves life forward. And then, of course, reconciliation and healing. And this is not so much for the nature elders. And you did mention, Dan, feel the tree's pain. I have to tell you that not in all of the years that I have been partnering with more than 50 nature elders and then across the world, have I ever felt them experience pain. I mean, we did a listening field with the fires and floods that have been happening in Canada. We did this last year. And so in the listening field, there were 16, I think, human beings, and there was at least double that of the nature elders, from trees to dead wood on the forest floor to blueberry bushes. Some human ancestors came in. But I will tell you that none of the tree beings were like, oh, I'm really sad about being burned down. They don't. It's part of their life cycle. And this is why I think that it's really important that we consult with them at every level of whatever we're doing, because invariably when we think are problems, they're not actually problems for them. The extinction of certain species, et cetera, some of the messages that have been coming through is that these species are not going to be able to survive in this new climate that is showing itself up on Earth. And so they die, and the ones that come back, or the new ones that come through, are much more adaptable and resilient to the world that we're going to be living in as we come forward. So it's things like that where I go, oh, I get it, and there's beautiful messages that came from that consultation about the fires and floods. So the reconciliation and healing is specifically in the case, I can imagine, so this is me imagining, I can imagine that there are industrialists and CEOs and board members, some of whom are going to wake up. They're going to wake up to their love and their relationship with nature people, and they're going to feel horrified at what they have done. And so the reconciliation and healing is more about when humans come together with the nature people that they've harmed and can actually speak their heart and can actually forgive themselves. Because the nature elders, the tree people, Mother Earth, etc., we are already forgiven, right? There's no guilting, there's no shame, nothing. Now, this is my experience. Someone else may have a different one. I only ever speak from my own. So that's where the listening field can help with that. And then last thing I'll just say is networking among diverse nations, races, species, and beings. So this is really interesting. We hosted a listening field with a tree a mother larch tree who lives on top of the last gas chamber in Auschwitz. And this was a listener in the field, was visiting there. She felt the communication from the larch tree, made the bond and the link, brought her into a big, huge global ceremony a month later. And the mother larch tree says to her, like with deep gratitude, thank you for inviting me into this field. She said, it's the first time I have felt joy. So then I'm guided to consult with this human and say, you know, I'm getting an impulse to let's open a listening field just for this tree elder. She said, wonderful. And I said, we need to do a meet and greet and make sure she wants to. We get consent and then we proceed. What was interesting was that there were two other tree people who voluntarily came forward. I mean, she'd seen them, but she hadn't created any sort of a bond, but they presenced themselves in her heart, and she invited them into the listening field. And they also got an opportunity to speak to us. What was remarkable was that through the human who brought them in, she said, these three trees, even though they live in different places on this property, had never actually consciously connected and communicated with each other. But through the listening field, they now had formed this triad, these three trees. And there was someone in that listening field who called in the kapok trees of the Amazon, powerful, powerful, powerful energetic beings. And they got to meet, right? Those three tree beings living in Auschwitz, right? Got to network with the kapok trees of the Amazon in a conscious way. And that is the message that I'm receiving over and over from other realms. Like there's fairy sages that are part of the listening field now as well, who are supporting this creation of partnership with the nature people. And they keep reminding us that, yes, like we as human beings, we've been at various stages of co-creative partnership, and individuals have. But what's happening now is at a level of consciousness that has never happened before. And so this is why this ceiba tree in Mexico just a month ago said to me, I said, do you have any guidance for us? And she said, know that human beings at this point are conscious connectors. Like we have a very specific role to help reweave the sacred web of connection, because we have the ability to modulate our frequency, to come into resonance, and then through that, right, who all we're connected with is bringing them into the web as well. So it's the level of consciousness that is new this time around. Dan,
That's
say something.
absolutely beautiful. I totally admire and respect, and you're very articulate about it as well. Just a few fun little comments. One note I would say is when we founded this community in North Carolina, in terms of, you said you never felt a tree talk about pain. There's a little story I'd like to say. So our community is called Circle of Life, Waynesville, North Carolina, the Biodome community. John Denver built the Biodome from Bucky there. Long story. So one day in our community, the spring up the hill, literally in the center of Cherokee Sacred Burial Ground, the spring stopped. Oh, no water. Oops, major problem. So the whole community convenes and goes up to have a conversation with this tree, for sure, because there's a tree, huge tree, lots of roots just over the spring. And by the way, it was the ladies who were able to communicate with that tree, for sure. Anywho, one lady said, yes, she had this, she closed her eyes, she got this image. She says, the tree says that the room came and cut my roots. It turns out a bulldozer had been there, I don't know, X number of weeks before, and for some little road, and had in fact cut and that tree. So this was a tree. It wasn't exactly talking about pain, but you see the implosion charge field, which is literally called blind spring, which is literally what attracts the water, the physics of what makes a spring work. That capacitive implosion, which is why cathedrals are called, because they're literally built on springs, Cistercian. So anywho, so the ladies were instructed by the tree to go up there and do these rituals, etc. And that brings me to the second point. We have actually had a tree talk about pain once, but I agree with your thought. But the other thing is about when you said about peace. Do we know what peace is? There's another little story I'd like to share here, which is my teacher for measuring tree life. And you can measure tree health by whether the low frequency harmonics catch the Schumann wind, was Professor Phil Callahan. And from what I learned from him, we started what's called peaceuniversity.net, which teaches the physics of peacemaking around the world. For example, he showed that as he was traveling in the Amazon, he could predict in advance whether the next tribe down the river was going to be friendly or headhunters. And the way he could measure whether the next tribe was going to be peaceful or not was whether the soil could conduct magnetism. It's called paramagnetic flux permissivity. Anyway, so that evolved him a theory of war versus peace, which was basically village A will not make war on village B if the magnetic line between them connects them because they can feel each other. So what he did is he actually went to Vukovar and Israel, Yugoslavia, and Ireland, and he measured the fact that war is predicted when magnetic lines break. As for example, when war breaks out, you can measure the underground water goes bye-bye. And so they sent the women to actually Vukovar in Yugoslavia, where the war and the underground water had measurably departed. And by the way, if children play, the underground water comes back because they love the bare feet. But anyway, so the women went there and they put these labyrinths in. It was Marty Kane, famous labyrinth builder from New England, martykane.com. And indeed, they made stone labyrinths. And we have this whole project about rainmaking, goldenmean.info/rain, where you make this implosion. Essentially, what you do is you restore magnetic fractality, looks like a rose to the land, and the rain returns. And oh, by the way, peacemaking is defined by peaceuniversity.net. Peacemaking is defined in general by the centripetal force made by charge fractality, charge implosion, because that's called the origin of negentropy, which is the title of my third book. So the negentropy, actually, that self-organization capability is the physics of peacemaking. And I learned that directly from Professor Phil Callahan, who actually is a pioneer in measuring tree life. So you see these things fit together, that what we're calling the listening field, when it gets bigger and bigger, actually is a big rose-shaped fractal that enables the charge distribution to come to that center. And then you hear your ears ring. This is my last example. So when I was teaching the biophysics of Kundalini for 30 years with Professor Ben Bentoff, who wrote the book on the biomechanics of Kundalini, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, we were measuring the frequencies. It's the ringing in the ears heard by meditators. Sometimes it's called sangreal or the song in the blood. It's actually, Valerie can tell which ancestor is telephoning by which ear is ringing, actually. The reason that is ancestor phone calls is because that phonon implosion, the ringing of the ventricles, the climax of Kundalini bliss, the documentaries are at goldenmean.info/Kundalini, the leading biophysics of Kundalini on the planet. So there we were measuring the ringing in the ears heard by meditators who were having bliss, which is literally ancestor voices, the song in the blood, sangreal. Well, it turns out that the ring in the ear is the crystallization of the ventricle liquid horns by the phonon cascade implosion of the sacrocranial frequencies, which are Schumann, etc. And so the liquids of the ventricles crystallize. It's called getting horny, actually. And the ringing in the ears, when we you have the meditators tuning a little audio oscillator, so you can actually measure the high frequency ringing they're hearing in their ears during their bliss. And we made charts and graphs. And then I did the analysis. Guess what? Planck times golden ratio exponents. Implosion sound is the ringing in the ear, which is ancestor voices. Talk about a listening field.
Absolutely beautiful. Really, really great stuff. So, Danielea, what I'd like to do is two things. Now, we've talked before, like I said, I was really lucky because we've been able to chat before about what is the process to go about to start communicating with nature, right? Now, for somebody that's watching the video, what is that process that you recommend? And I do believe that there was a story about somebody in New York that had been at a park, saw a tree, and then realized that once they physically left the presence of the tree, they were able to communicate with the tree from a distance, which is kind of what you're doing with the listening field when you're bringing in elders and bringing in, all these different trees. So I'd like to get just an overview. What does that look like, and how would somebody watching the video start that process? And then I want to get into and finish up with the olive tree people. I want to know kind of how you how you met up with them and how that interaction, how that connection started, and then kind of where this is all going, because this is going to lead into definitely more videos in the future. So can you start off and just kind of say, look, if you're out there and you're looking to start this process, what does that look like? What would somebody do? And Dan can obviously break down the physics of maybe, some of that, but kind of get us started with that. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a tree. I mean, we could talk streams, rivers, and other bodies, but what does that look like? And what would you recommend for the average person out there watching this video to kind of get integrated into the process of getting connected?
Beautiful. Thank you, Sean. Hmm. So again, I'm going to repeat myself, but this is a very natural process. You don't need to understand it. You don't need to understand it. In fact, you need to trust what happens for you inside. So the first thing is to trust who you love. So when you think about nature, who comes to your heart mind, not your mind, but who comes to your heart mind. And whoever comes first, trust that. Trust that. Now, for some people, that might be a childhood tree. And it might even be that, the timing is so perfect that you're going back to visit your parents and they still live in the same house, and you're actually going to be able to come into in person, into the same field, physical field as that tree elder. But it's not required, because there is no space or time in this kind of non-local listening is what they call it. I'm sure that it can be explained through quantum reality and entanglement theory and all that sort of thing. But the truth is we're all connected and there's no space or time in that. So it's trust who you love, where you're drawn to, right? So if you want to connect with someone, all you need to do is go into your heart and just express that wish, either out loud or silently inside. Notice who comes to your heart mind and go to that place. Now, it's really important that as we are, that we prepare to connect. And you can see that already I've slowed down. So the speed at which the left brain, and I would say that's what this, the science, your explanation, Dan, everything, it's like, it's rapid fire, right? So that's an air energy. It's very, very fast. But our emotional bodies, our feeling selves are more like water. So they're slower. And so we require to slow down. So literally what that means for me is I just take a few moments to just like sit down, stop, and I do nothing. But what I do is I just breathe. Inhale through my nose, exhale long and slow through my mouth. I use the water breath. That's what works for me. And after about 3 breaths, all of a sudden, I'm pretty much in my heart awareness and field. And, if I already know who I'm going to connect to, then I'm sitting in front of that being. So I'm on the river bank facing the river, or I'm sitting in front of the tree. I never go and sit with the tree. I never go and sit with them without asking, but it's just not the way. I'm about, sort of two-way conversation like we're having here. So the first thing is slow down, breathe, and it's just to become present. And that's also part of this resonance of coming into resonance with the nature community where I'm sitting, is because that's where they live. We kind of have to go where they live, and they live in the now. They live in presence. So when I become present, I become an energetic match for the nature community that I'm sitting in that moment. Now, focus and maintaining focus, which is why people who meditate, etc., this is very easy for them because they're used to focusing. So then my focus becomes the tree person or the water person in front of me. And I literally just feel my appreciation and love or feelings for them in that moment. The gratitude you spoke about, that's a great place to start. But if you already feel love for this tree because you walk by it every day, or you've just naturally been gravitated, you sit under it and journal or something. So you already have a relationship, but it's just, again, to bring it up to a more conscious level. And I'm just going to feel my gratitude and my love. And when that's generated inside, I literally give it to them. I send it to them. And when I send it to the tree person of the water, I can feel them receive it on the other side. And so that's what I call a heart link. I'm on one end, the telephone line, the heart line is on the other, and then there's the river person. And then I feel them send something back. Now, it can just be a wave of energy, a joy. That's often true with water. Trees can be a lot more subtle. You talk about those low frequencies. I mean, in the years, I spent 4 years listening with trees. They are the ones who taught me how to slow down and listen. And I had to slow real down, for some of them in order to sort of come into that low frequency resonance. But once I feel the connection and I've offered something, they've offered something back, we're in what I call we're in. And then we're just in a space that is the same as when we're in heart conversation with a human, when we go for a tea or a coffee and we share something meaningful. So that's the other piece I want to say, is that when we choose to share, say, for example, I have a challenge or something, there's something going on at work, and I choose to just say, brother, sister, river, I'm really having a challenge with a person at work, and I keep getting triggered by them, and I'm not understanding why. I keep promising myself I'm going to keep my cool, but I don't. Do you have any guidance? Can you help me understand what's going on? And then again, make the request, sent out through my heart. And then I just breathe and feel, and I just wait. I just wait. And something will come back. I will receive an image, a memory will be triggered, I will hear words, I'll have physical sensations in my body. If I need more clarity about that, I just say, can you show me more? Can you tell me more? Or I just we sit together with that new information. And one of the things that is so remarkable about this simple way of connecting is that even by being, and of course, Dan, you've explained it so beautifully from the science perspective, just being in heart link with this nature person has already shifted my energetic frequency. And I become calm. I become whatever their particular frequency. It's going to be different. If I'm sitting with a waterfall, believe me, it's a completely different energy that I become entrained with than the peace and calm and slowness of a tree person, right? And so already my frequency and the alchemy of what we create together is actually opening possibilities. So in terms of problem solving, it's why I'm so, listening fields, we do so much with consultations for groups, for individuals, for businesses, etc. Because not only, as I said, do the nature elders have different perspectives on issues, they've got a longer trajectory in their own understanding, but also the combination of our two consciousnesses opens up this field, which I described for the listening field, this standing wave of open, emergent, responsive, evolving, and generative. And so when we're in that space, myself and the tree elder, and I've expressed the issue and the elder has brought something in, I start to get access to new insights, imaginations, things I've never thought of before. And all of a sudden I go, oh my gosh, I get it. So again, it's like we consult with them, but it's not like, oh, you know everything and da 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 da. They don't know about humans. They know mostly about their own community and themselves. But together, we have access to realms and the co-creation of reality that neither of us ever did. But just to come back to what your ask was, it's, slow down, feel love, connect, have the conversation. You'll know when it's over. And I'll tell you, mine happened super fast. This is not a big, huge, long process for me. It's super, super fast. You'll know when it's done. And then it's express gratitude. I always like to offer a song, or I offer tobacco, or, that's done at the beginning. I can do so at the end as well, but it's always, always thank you. And I'll tell you one other piece about the gratitude. I have discovered that it's very meaningful to the nature elders when I actually, in my gratitude, say, thank you for, and I specifically name what it is that I now understand that was new from the exchange. And I understand, even from a student teacher point of view, it's like, the teacher goes, well, what did you learn? And the student goes, I learned this, this, and this. And the teacher knows, you know what I mean? That the student was able to grasp the information and come away with new learning. So I do that. I recommend people do that as well. Thank you for helping me feel calm and peaceful, see you again. And then we withdraw our attention from that bond, and we go on our separate ways. And the truth is that later in the day, or if it was that example where there's a challenge with someone at work and I have a meeting with that person, I can consciously, before I enter into that meeting, first of all, calm my own self, come into my heart, invite the tree person or the water person to just, hey, will you just stay with me while I'm in this meeting with so and so? And I tell you, to be in that resonance consciously with that elder and then be with this human, it shifts how you perceive, and things that were conflicts or triggers, they kind of disappear because the tree people and the nature people sit in the realm of serving life. That is their only reason for being. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't involve death. It absolutely doesn't involve death. And the death of one thing serves the life of another, and they understand that very well. So I guess what I'm saying with this example is, we, I believe, have only just touched the surface of what is possible when we consciously partner as sovereign beings with sovereign beings to co-create a new reality on Earth. Literally, anything is possible through that heart bond, I like to say.
Voices of nature, a beautiful thing, and you express it so well. One thing you brought up, I think that's might be a good introduction to some more sort of science here, that the tree appreciates the need for death, or what it is that is successful death. That actually, we know now that successful death requires a compression implosion moment, which is why you see your whole life flash before you. And the physics of how you achieve successful death, which is actually that all of your experience has to be compressed into pure information that serves survival, exactly how you describe the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And which is, for example, the physics of why anger cannot go through death, because the shape of the waveform for anger 1/7 literally is not compressible, cannot be imploded, and therefore cannot be perfectly distributed. So in a sense, we have a whole curriculum on physicsofsoul.com and the curriculum for electrically successful death and the release of ghosts, goldenmean.info/immortality. Point being, and you see this series of Heinrich Kluge form constants, lattice, cobweb, tunnel spiral before death, and why that is a map to death, which is simply the superposed axes of spin symmetry in DNA preparing to implode and achieve distribution into the longitudinal array, the physics of tree radio. So you can't go through death unless you can implode and go through the still point. The point I'm making is the science of preparing for successful death is the same as the science of preparing for a lucid dream or a tree communication, which is to say, enter the still point, enter the array. Daniel Brinkley survived death about 3 times, by inhabiting a lightning bolt and wrote 3 books about it. Well, actually, you can't get into the middle of a lightning bolt unless you can, inhabit the center of that spin, like the Sufi doing the dervish turn, proving to his master that he has pure intention because he does not get dizzy when the spin gets dense.
Mm.
That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. So much great information. Like, the longer this call goes on, the better it gets. But I do want to set up for having another call. But Danielea, what I'd like to maybe finish off with on our first conversation is, I'd like to talk about how you met the olive tree people, because this is an upcoming thing that you're going to go to Greece. Like, this is like in motion right now. Dan's in France. He might even be able to come down and spend some time with you down there. But I'd like, you said earlier that since you've been communicating and since you've had contact with the olive tree people, that there's been changes and there's been real measurable things in your life that have changed from that communication and from that relationship. So maybe you could talk about how that introduction was made. I loved what you talked about earlier about, you know, how you're going to approach the trees and how you go and you hit that still point, you use your torso to kind of measure the field, and then you offer a prayer, and you know, you kind of wait back and listen and let them approach you. That is just such a beautiful, beautiful explanation on, you know, just that whole process. But if maybe we could talk about how that relationship began, and then we could talk about some of those changes, and then we'll talk about where this is going to go, and then bring people back to the listening field, because ultimately we want to help bring some donations in to support you, to support the listening field.life. We want to promote the website. We want to promote your work. And so if that's okay with you, maybe we could do that. And then Dan, if there's anything you'd like to finish with, then we can kind of finish off there, because this call has been phenomenal. I am like, I'll probably watch this conversation, even though I'm with you guys right now, 20 more times. But I really am excited to introduce both of you together. This, for me, has been something that I've just literally dreamed about. And I'm so happy that this is finally happening. But, you know, we'll look forward to some other stuff coming in the future. So how did the whole relationship begin with the olive tree people?
Thank you, Sean. October 7th, 2023 happened. So of course that was the beginning for many of us in the international community to not only wake up to what has been happening in occupied Palestine for, you know, over 80 years, but also really brought us into the conscious, in our face awareness of what we are doing to each other as human beings. You know, I mean, there's been this wake up that's been happening. So I, like everyone else, was really affected. Within 3 to 4 days, I received a call, the way that I do, to open a listening field with the nature elders in the Middle East. So I get very specific instructions. It wasn't open with nature elders in Gaza and Israel. It was the Middle East, the whole area. And I was like, okay, that makes sense to me, actually, because the whole area is of great significance. I needed to go through my own personal process about what was happening. And that took me a couple of weeks. And by the time I was ready to host the listening field, I need to be in a place of wholeness. Right? There's no partisan. I'm not partisan as an interbeing ambassador or as the host of the listening field. I am in wholeness. So I needed to return to that wholeness. And then I organized the first listening field with the nature elders of the Middle East. And what was interesting about this is that in this instance, I was guided to call in the Nile River, who I had met before, who is a water elder, but I had met him way back in 1987. And also, I was guided to call in a tree elder who I had been introduced to through a Nature and Me program that I had designed for some youth that had gone on in the summer previous. So there was a tree elder that lives beside the Nile and is partly in the Nile, and there was the Nile River themselves. Now, just to give you an example, I'll stop sharing for a moment, just to give you an example, I asked the Nile, how can I support peace in the Middle East? And I heard him say, rise into your fullness. Rise into your fullness. And I literally saw myself shoot out of the Nile River, and I had 2 wings, and I was shooting towards the sky. Now, this is not something that's normal for me. I don't, you know, actually don't normally, I see sometimes, but it's not my primary. I'm a telepath. But that was really clear. Rise into your fullness. This was last October. And I was like, okay, it's kind of like I need to step up. What am I, who am I? What am I here to do? And what am I not doing about that yet? Right. The other thing that the message that I received from him was he showed me the bottom of his river. And he said, peace is at the bottom of your love. Peace is at the bottom of your love. Again, these messages from the nature elders. They're like, they're clues, you know, there's sometimes holographic knowledge that you have to unpack or have to live in order to understand what is this specifically for me and how can I take that into action. And then I consulted with this tree elder who, as I said, I was introduced to him through a listening field. A young woman had brought him in who lived in Cairo in Egypt. And I asked him, did he have any comments or any guidance for me? I mean, the whole thing was about the war and about peace, et cetera, and how we could support. And this tree elder said to me, let go of identities that constrain you. Let go of identities that constrain you. Learn to adapt. Learn to adapt. So those are two different messages. And then do not let the reality of another break your spirit. So when I receive these messages, they literally are imprinted. They echo in me, they inform my cells, they inform again, you know, Dan could explain why or how this happens, but I just know that it does. And so I knew that do not let the reality of the break your spirit. There are some people who are so heartbroken by what is happening in Gaza, about the genocide there and in other places, that they're not actually able to function. Now, I know from experience, from my dialogues with Mother Earth, she never asks us to sacrifice ourselves for her or for anything, actually. And that when we're consumed, I know, again, when I'm consumed by guilt or that sort of thing, it prevents me from being proactive. It prevents me from actually serving life in whatever way that I can. So this was just a reminder for me not to go too deep into this, the grief of what is happening, unless I'm going to go right through it and come out the other side. Then it's perfectly, it's a very productive pathway. So this is just an example of when we receive these messages, I write them down, I keep them where they're visual, they keep informing me and what happens for me. So what was interesting about after we do the solo time in the listening field, everybody puts in the chat on the Zoom, who did they speak to, what did they ask, and what information did they receive? So that's me, the social artist, the social researcher. I've been tracking all this data. And then we have a live share. And what was interesting to me at that point was that olive trees from 4 different locations, 2 different locations in Morocco, one on the Mount of Jerusalem, the Gethsemane, that very famous grove of olive trees. Those were those 3. And then the 4th was the olive elder that you see behind me. His name is Al-Badawi, and he's 4,000 years old. And he lives in a small village in the occupied West Bank. And he came through. And when the woman who brought him through spoke about him, I had a little thing go in my body. It was like, ding, some kind of wake up. And I went, okay. And so I approached her afterwards and I said, I think I'm supposed to meet your elder. Can we open a listening field with just the 3 of us? And you invite him in. And I want to speak with him. So we did that 1 week later on November 11th, 2023. And I had a profound experience with this elder. Now, he is what I would call a planetary nature elder. He's working on the planetary level. I would classify the Himalayas, the Andes, the Arctic, the Amazon, Uluru. These are nature beings who are functioning at a planetary level. And so he's the second one that I've met, but the first one that I've met that has a collective, I would say a collective mission. So it's a much longer story about what happened during there, but the experience was so profound that I went, okay, I would like some verification from some other listeners. So I organized 4 more listening fields only by invitation. I was well aware how much anything anyone spoke, either on either side, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was creating polarity all over the place. And that's not my job to do that. And so these listening fields were by invitation only. They were people that I trusted their capacity as listeners, and I trusted the work that they had done on themselves and personally. And each person was in their own way affirming, holy crap, this nature elder, he is a massive spiritual being, and he's connected with all the other olive trees. And then what started to happen so I had 3 listening fields where I was in conversation with him. But eventually what happened is we stopped talking. And then the rest was I just was aligning and training with his frequency. That was it. That was how he was training me. It was just like, be me. And then once I became his frequency, I was saying decrees like, I am the peace, I am peace. I talk peace. I live peace. I speak peace. Like these decrees were coming out, and I was, these were messages to my cells. So what happened shortly after that was, and because some people connect with the Davic realm more than the physical realm. I've predominantly been physical, not the Davic realm, but somebody else brought in the Deva of the olive trees and the Deva, and she's the one who started to presence herself in my heart. I soon learned because I kept saying, I would say the Deva of peace instead of the Deva of olive trees, and I would connect myself. And then people would go, Danielea, are you talking about the Deva of peace? And I go, did I say it again? And they'd go, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's how I know something's changed for me, is my language changes. Our language is our operating system. So when it changes, I go, okay, something's going on, and I pay attention. And so in a subsequent listening field, I said, okay, what's the deal? Is it the Deva Peace? And they answered me and they said, we are one within each other. I said, are you twins? Are what's your deal? What's your deal together? And we're one within each other. So it was like, it doesn't matter. But what started happening was the same thing, meaning that when in the solo time, I would connect with the energy of the Deva of the olive trees. So she's connected with all of them, and I would entrain with it. And all of a sudden, I was looking at the world, or being in the world, from this space of unconditional care for all. Now, those are my words that I put on this experience, on her energy, unconditional care for all, not unconditional love, unconditional care. And again, I pay attention. I don't really know what that means, but I know that it's important that I be consistent, that those are the words I use, and that's what I think and feel, etc. So over time, what started happening when I was connecting with her, that there was both the Deva of the olive trees and the Deva of peace, and these wings were appearing on the back of my body, and their energy was filling these wings. And she said to me, she said, you can relate to your reality through our frequency. And then she said, if you connect with me every day, our frequency will become yours permanently. And this is when I began to understand what it was going to mean for me to actually step into this role as an interbeing ambassador. That no longer could I even have an echo of not liking humanity or judging humanity, right? Or any of that energy, which I carried for a very long time. But like, that was over. I cannot have that. And that was one of the things that Al-Badawi did for me the first time we connected, is he made me instantly nauseous, as if I'd taken ayahuasca and I was about to purge. I mean, instantly. I was like, holy crap. And so, the video's off, my friend's connecting, in the field. And I literally get up and go to the bathroom. And I was like, I'm going to throw up. And so I didn't, but I was like, and so then the waves passed, but then my belly like really, really hurt. And I went back and I re-entered the conversation. And I was like, dude, are you a purifier of conflict? No answer. When there's no answer, it's either they don't have an answer, or it's not true, or they're not interested in, it's not their subject, kind of thing. But there was no response. And I was like, okay, wrong question. Are you a purifier of war? No answer. And then I was like, I remember the ray I used to carry heavily. As much as I carried love, I carried hate. I hated humanity. I did. didn't admit it to anybody, but I did. And I said, are you a purifier of hate? And then boom was the answer. Yes. And so I realized, I says, what you just helped me energetically purge, I didn't physically purge, but energetically purge, did you just help me purge the remaining echoes from when I used to hate humanity? Yes or no? Yes. So that's when I started to get excited. I was like, wow, you know, for those of us we call us international humans, we're not directly connected with the conflict that is happening, the genocide that is happening on either side. We're not, but what do? We want to do something to help. And of course, we know now, because we're all connected, the more that we can become peace, those of us in thought, word, deed, and action, the more we can do that, we're helping the frequency of peace amplify on our planet. And it does affect what happens in areas where there isn't peace. And so I started to realize that the olive tree people were coming forward, that this was literally them coming forward and inviting us to partner. And I checked that out in different consultations with different people, and the answer came back, yes. So in total, I did 5 listening fields. I hosted 5 listening fields private ones, where we were consulting, growing with the olive tree people. Then I began doing public consultations on the 6th day of each month, starting January 6th, February, March, April, May, right? And then June. And those are opportunities for you, the public, to join the listening field, and we call in, Alba do we call in the Deva of Peace. You can call them in as well, and you will connect with them. But you can also people call in olive trees that they met in Italy, 20 years ago, or I have a Greek man who calls in the olive tree at the Oracle of Delphi in Greece. And then you converse heart to heart. You share what's going on. You ask for their guidance. But it's really all about us shifting and changing our own frequency, our own way of being in the world, so that we are literally thinking, feeling, acting, and being peace. So just to give you an example, I got tested. So once I started this frequency upgrade with the Deva of Peace and the Deva of the Olive Trees, I went into a grocery store one day, and I had a really odd experience. Like the person who was checking me out, the cashier, took it upon themselves to I mean, it was so odd, and it was really disrespectful. And I had every right to kind of be righteous and angry and show me the manager and da 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 da, and what's your name? And I did do those, but I stayed completely calm. The person didn't tell me their real name. I knew that they lied, but I didn't put it in their face. I didn't cause trouble. Anyways, the long and short of it is that instead of going, I've been treated really poorly and I want redress for this, right, from a person in authority, I watched myself do the normal things as a sovereign human who's been disrespected. But I became curious about what in this person's experience and what I did that triggered it. So I went to a compassionate response, which I normally wouldn't. I would have been like, oh, this person's unconscious, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just saying that I tracked that I had a completely different response. And in the end, I got the manager's name, I got his phone number, I knew when he was going to be in the store, I had all that information, and I just kept watching this impulse to go in and tell this person what happened. And you need to, just from this place of you need to know that this is what happened. You need to know what's going on in your store. And as time went by, and and more time with the Deva of Peace and the Deva of the Olive Trees, I realized that and the impulse disappeared. And I didn't actually do anything about it at all. What I did realize that it was the universe testing me. Was I really committed to peace, or was I only committed to peace when it was easy? When somebody does something against me? Right? So that's just one small example of how I track my responses are different now because my commitment, I've made a commitment with the Deva of Peace, the Deva of the Olive Trees, with Al-Badawi, and with the Sitka Spruce family to be an interbeing ambassador. And that means that I need to handle my own stuff. I need to handle it. And I do whatever I need to do in order to handle it. Right? So that I can be in a place where I am contributing to the frequency of peace, the frequency of harmony. And I hold myself to a very high standard because of my contract with the nature elders. And
I think there's something so beautiful in your story about, peace is at the bottom of your love. If you look at the sort of science that the reason the oldest trees with the biggest root systems and the longest wave and the lowest frequency and the biggest world of listening field, the reason they can take responsibility for a bigger world, in this case, peace in the Middle East, if you look at more than the symbolism, an olive leaf or an olive branch is the symbol of peacemaking. And the olive itself is the symbol of the heart, and the olive leaf is the symbol of, it's very healing. But if you think of the root issue, there is two peoples who are fighting over basically the same land, which is to say ancestor memory, which lives in that land via the connections between those roots. So if ever there was a symbol for a whole people that were torn from their land, it's access to the old olive trees. It is the essence of the conflict in their hearts. The Palestinians are being torn from their olive trees, and the ancient olive trees are why they're crying, because that's the voices of their ancestors. So if ever there was an intelligent nature being who wished to take responsibility for the voice of how to make peace here, the olive tree is the perfect, it's not just symbolics, it's beautiful physics as well. It's the perfect logo for the issue.
absolutely. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So this, of course, is Al-Badawi, and this is Salah Abu Ali. He is the human guardian. For some people, you may already know that, yes, the olive trees are under threat. And yeah, they're being used to cause harm to the Palestinian people because they truly are family members. Just like I use that language, they use it as well. This is what happens monthly, and you're going to see something important here, is that another species has come forward and wants to join the olive trees, and they have for peace. And so now they are officially part of this alliance. And the Deva of the Kukui has actually joined the Deva of Peace and the Deva of the olive trees for me. So now I have 3 Devas, and the Kukui have a very different energy and offering about them as well. And so, I haven't officially created anything yet for this alliance, but because it's growing and it's really, I see the purpose, it's the application of the interbeing ambassador, it's for peace, this is the role. I'm going to be creating something that's a little bit more formal, but you get the idea here. And then here's what's happening. There's this beautiful event, as you can see, it's called Uniting in Our Humanity. It's May 30th to June 5th. And this event has been organized by 2 young women, both of whom are Greek. And it's interesting that I heard the call to come to Greece to visit the olive tree, to meet the olive trees in person on January the 6th. And they tell me that on June 8th, one of them texted the other to say, I want to organize this event. And the long and short of it is that through synchronicities, I find out that this event is happening. I plan a different trip to Greece to meet olive trees in another location. And then I find out that this beautiful event is happening that is bringing Palestinian facilitators and participants together with Israeli facilitators and participants to explore through the body, which is a language is my language as well, to explore the threads of our shared humanity. And on top of this, there is a sacred olive tree and whole grove of olive tree elders and other tree elders in the valley of Ilionas, and that they had just planned to make a pilgrimage there when they found out about me and invited me to come. And so what you see here is I created, for the very first time, I created a GoFundMe page to cover my travel costs. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, they have been fundraising to bring the whole facilitator team, because we're all offering, you know, what we're doing. We're volunteering. So they're paying for travel, food, and accommodation. And of course, the organizers are covering my food and my accommodation. And I said, I will ask my community to fundraise my travel costs, because there's expensive visas and other things. They're bringing people from the West Bank. And so I wanted them to, you know, to apply that funds to their own, to bringing those facilitators. And so I just created this on my Facebook profile. We haven't met yet. She is one of the olive tree grandmothers, considered by the locals to be one of the grandmothers. Apparently we can sleep inside her. So not only am I going to get to meet her and all these other olive tree elders, but I'm also going to get to be overnight with her. And you know, this is jumping ahead of the game, but I'm even in my own mind, I'm realizing that we are interbeing ambassadors together. And that's just something, again, when I say that listening field is open, emergent, responsive, evolving, and generative, this is the kind of thing that happens where it's like, oh, I'm not just the human that's providing that bridge between the two. Actually, we're doing that role together. So just before we close, I want to share with you that I feel that also as part of the mission, not only to consult the nature elders, but that it's incumbent on us to share the wisdom that we receive from them with the public. So there's an educative aspect to this. And this is, you'll see some great video on this on our YouTube channel, The Listening Field, with the Bev Templeton, who's the one of the co-founders of Global Tree Lovers. She received this message from the olive tree people. They literally said to her, switch the position of 2 letters in our name and olive becomes I love. I mean, wow.
There you go. Talk about
Wow.
embedding perfected.
And then
Yeah.
this is another example. And again, for me, I notice what happens in my body. And that's when something in me rises up to meet the frequency of the message, I know there's something there for me to learn. And this one has stayed with me for a long. I make these memes, by the way, from the messages that are in the chat, always tracking what's new, right? Not confirming what we already know, but what's new. And this one, you know, let go and stay connected. And I remember when the person who received this, Pamela Schreiner, when she said it, I was like, and I noticed and realized that in my own consciousness, when I was imagining letting go, it meant that I did this. I turned away from someone or something and I cut all ties. It's kind of weird. I mean, I was tracking this in my own consciousness or unconsciousness. And I realized, you know, they're inviting me to let go of what no longer serves and stay connected. And it's up to me to answer, let go of what and to stay connected with who. So again, there's nothing about telling anyone else what is good for them to do. But for us as evolving human beings, I think it's our responsibility to unpack these messages and to see how and if they apply to us. So I want to leave you with this final, because, you know, the olive tree people, like the kukui, it's interesting, kukui is the same. They produce nuts and they produce oil. So there's something about these tree species and these nature people that have something for us. But this was a message received by Ingrid Taggart from the Deva of the olive trees. And this is what she heard. Them asking us, they're saying to us, we offer you the essence of life. Receive our gift, receive it. Drink, eat, be in the golden flow and pass it on. So how does this translate? Every time you use olive oil, it's an opportunity to take a moment to just connect heart to heart, offer your gratitude, feel the love, feel the vibration of the spiritual essence of the olive tree people, and know that they actually are the essence of peace. They're not just the symbol of peace, they are the essence and embody peace. So when you link with them, it increases your own quotient of that energy. And of course, you can do that by eating the olives, by et cetera, et cetera. And again, I said this, but this is, I recently met the ceiba trees in Chiapas in the jungle in Mexico. And when I asked her, what guidance do you have for us? This is what she said: human beings are the conscious connectors at this time. So I think that's all I have for you. We can put some links maybe when these are posted in terms of, where people can donate. I'm happy to say that we're getting close. We're getting close to the final for the travel costs. And I guess the last thing I want to say to you is, all these years when I would do all these pilgrimages, get on planes and et cetera, I've never fundraised. I've never had a grant, nothing. Everything's been financed by me. And then everything, the listening field has been offered free for 5 years. This is our 5th year. And what I'm understanding is that this interbeing ambassador, this role for peace, it's a job. And I propose that we're all going to be doing new jobs in this new reality, and that these new jobs, we are actually the ones that set the terms. It's, in the old paradigm, it's like, okay, you become an engineer, and then this is what you do to become an engineer, and then this is the range of what you'll get paid, and this is like, it's predetermined by someone else. But I think the reality that we're creating together is we are creating it. The leaders aren't, the community is, and we, each of us, are one by one. So, I believed a tree species that I'm an interbeing ambassador, and it took 16 years. And I finally now understand what that role is. And my terms are, as an interbeing ambassador, I wait to be invited. So if you want me to come to something and bring the nature elders into that event or into your project, I need to be invited, which means I don't volunteer. I stay in my own world and you invite me. The other piece of it is I'm sponsored.
Well, you don't need to apologize for asking for support. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful service, of course. I have to say, perhaps I became that engineer, become the engineer, then I became the teacher of the science of peacemaking, peaceuniversity.net. And the essence of that science, called plankfire.com, is that charge collapse, that implosion, that fractal implosion, represented by what a tree is actually the implosion of charge that makes that field stable like a rose. And the stability of that field, called negentropy, is actually the essence of the physics of peacemaking, which I would remind, the word science, actually Xian, is to branch perfectly. And the word physics, as in phi cycle, means the golden flow, literally, as you say, which means we're all imitating what trees are in essence.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Yes.
Danielea, this has just been an absolutely phenomenal call, 100 times greater than I probably ever would have imagined, because of the timing and what's going on and getting you and Dan together. I mean, as somebody I can tell you, thousands and thousands of people watch this, and I know they're going to love it as much as I do. I just want to finish off and say real quick, watching you come full circle, and that connection with the olive tree people, and really being put into this time, place, circumstance right now with the trees that are right behind you. And then the experience of pushing the anger out and literally feeling sick, and that experience of feeling that energy and literally cleansing you is really amazing. Like, I mean, it goes so far beyond, just what our consciousness thinks that's possible. And it's just opening up this massive window of, like I kind of was saying, where nature goes and what's possible, and what our connections with the universe and with Mother Earth, and I mean, this is just, it's phenomenal. It's so beautiful. So I wanted to just share, thank you so much for sharing all this. The timing couldn't be better. what I'd like to do now, I am not able to get on Facebook for whatever reason. They decided I'm not one of their best friends, but the listening field.life is the web address, correct?
It is. At the moment, it's just a landing page. The website is being constructed. I've been so busy that I haven't, I just haven't gotten
No
that
problem.
done. But the YouTube channel is the best place to go. Go to the YouTube channel, The Listening Field, because and
You've
I
got amazing videos. Yeah, I've watched most of, not all of them. Phenomenal. When we get off the call, can you send me over that GoFundMe link? Because when I publish the video, and probably for Dan as well,
yeah.
I'd like to put that link down at the bottom. I'll have it also on here. I'm going to put the link to the listeningfield.life, and I do a lot of stuff online. So if you ever need help with anything related to a website or the internet, I would more than be grateful to donate any time or anything I can do to help you. And I am so grateful, Dan. I love you. You're amazing, and I'm so grateful for everything you share. And Danielea, this has been the best. This has been the best YouTube video I've ever done. So
Oh, thank you
thank
so
you
much.
for both
And
of you for everything you do.
just in closing, if I could plug our latest project, physicsofsoul.com, where we know what happens when you're sitting under a tree in bliss, that implosion compresses in the recursive braiding of the DNA. And what emerges is longitudinal coherence, which is the demonstrable, measurable physics of whether you lucid dream, whether you have clairvoyance, whether you have telepathy, and literally whether you take memory through death. That coherent longitudinal field, meaning we can now teach by measurement electrical engineers the physics of what a soul is, and therefore save the souls of billions of children who are being robbed of their souls right now actively by the soul destroying Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, electrosmog metal hell of their schools and their communications. So after governments and universities learn what a soul is, then we don't have to have a soulless society where all of our children are losing their soul. Physicsofsoul.com, which is really what you get when you learn to sit under a tree and get that peace. So there's a really climax lesson here that we can teach governments what a soul is.
Full circle. The beauty of trees helping kids retain their souls and
Exactly.
communicate and healing the planet. It's absolutely beautiful.
Great.
Danielea, anything else you'd like to say before we call it a show here?
No, I guess well, one exciting thing is that the event that I'm going to on Ehina, the island of Ehina, it ends on June the 5th, and then the facilitating team, which I'm part of, will stay an extra day to debrief. And actually, it's June 6th. So I will be broadcasting from the island of Ahina, the monthly consultation in the listening field with the olive tree people. I have no idea if there's cell service in this sacred valley, and whether I could actually host that listening field almost like a hybrid, where I'm sitting with the olive tree in the grove of the olive trees while we're doing an online listening field as well. But if you join we'll put the links so you can join the mailing list at the landing page. So, and then if you're donating, then you're going to be on a special list. So I'm going to be sharing about the journey, and also I'm going to be a public sharing when I'm coming back. That will be the week of June the 17th. So, I just really feel that this is just the beginning of this path for me of moving around the world and supporting peace through the inclusion of the nature elders, including the olive trees and the kukui trees as well. So, yeah. Trust your
I
love.
can't wait till our next video. I cannot wait. Thank you so much once again. If you want to just, Dan and Danielea, just hang with me. I'm going to just
Right.
turn off the recording, and then we can chat for a minute, and then go about our day. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Blessings, everybody.